Et bonjour. This is a lesson on French adverbial expressions of quantity. Now, we've talked about many expressions of quantity. Today, we're going to take it a step further. But let's just go back and review for a minute. Most of the time, French expressions of quantity are followed by de. Now, remember, de becomes the apostrophe when your word begins with a vowel. Okay, even when the word that follows is plural. So even though it's sometimes tempting to use de, de la, du, or de, l apostrophe after these expressions, remember you have to change it to de because we're talking about quantities. All right, so let's just have a look at a few examples here. Now, the reason why we're talking about expressions of quantity followed by de, as you'll see a little later in the lesson, we're going to talk about other times when we do de, when we do use de. And then later in the course, we'll talk about even more times when we use de. So this is one of the most important little words in French, and sometimes it just pops up in places where you're not expecting it to. Okay, tu vas boire combien de jus? Tu vas boire combien de jus? So combien de means how much, right? So we have to follow it by de instead of du, even though jus is masculine and singular. So how much juice are you going to drink? Tu vas boire combien de jus? Or how about this? J'ai trop de devoirs ce soir. J'ai trop de devoirs ce soir. Even though devoir is plural, we stick with de. I have too much homework this evening. All right, we do need to talk about an exception. So remember that the definite articles le, la, and les, when they're preceded by de, they usually change to du and de. And these definite articles, le, la, and les, may be used with these expressions if you're indicating the quantity of a specific item. So that's going to make more sense when you see a few examples. Ils ont bu pas mal du jus que j'ai acheté. Now this can be confusing because pas mal de means quite a bit of, a fair amount of. But we're going to use du instead of de because we're talking about a specific item. In this case, the specific item is the juice that I bought. You see, it's not just ils ont bu pas mal de jus, and then that's the end of it. Well, that would be a DE. But now I'm talking about specific juice, right? The juice that I bought. We're going to see some more examples like that a little further on in the lesson. But first, let's go over these adverbial expressions of quantity that you have already learned. Now, remember, you have a Quizlet study set that you can go back and use to review these if you've forgotten a few of them. Just repeat after me. Répétez après moi. Assez de, autant de, beaucoup de, combien de, moins de, pas mal de, un peu de, peu de, plein de, plus de, tant de, un tas de, tellement de, trop de. D'accord? That's the part we've already seen. Now we're going to talk about our French expressions of quantity, but this time indicating weight and volume. So I'm going to show you a list of them in a minute, but first let's have a look at some examples. Okay, je vais te servir une tasse de café. Je vais te servir une tasse de café means I'm going to serve you a cup of coffee. D'accord? Remember, te means you, and it's a pronoun, but in French, we're going to put it in front of the verb that it's connected to in meaning, right? In context. So who am I going to serve? You. Je vais te servir une tasse de café. Okay, this one might be new to you. Une barquette de. Il y a une barquette de fraises sur la table de la cuisine. Il y a une barquette de fraises sur la table de la cuisine. So that means there's a basket of strawberries on the kitchen table. And you may remember the word basket meaning un panier. Un panier. I could have said il y a un panier de fraises. That's still a quantity. But just so that you know the difference between un panier and une barquette, you know when you go to the market or to the store and you buy a basket of strawberries, that little basket that you buy them in, that's the barquette. D'accord? Next example. C'est une bonne idée de boire 2 litres d'eau par jour. C'est une bonne idée de boire 2 litres d'eau par jour. C'est une bonne idée. It's a good idea. De boire, to drink, 2 litres d'eau. It's not 2 litres de l'eau. 2 litres d'eau because it's 2 liters of water. And, you know, anytime you want to say that it's a good idea to do something, c'est une bonne idée de. You see, there's your word de again, and it's followed by an infinitive. C'est une bonne idée de boire. It's a good idea to drink. D'accord? Alors, je vais inviter une vingtaine de personnes à ma fête d'anniversaire. Je vais inviter une vingtaine de personnes à ma fête d'anniversaire. So this expression, une vingtaine de, means about 20. D'accord? About 20, une vingtaine. So I'm going to invite about 20 people to my birthday party. Une vingtaine de personnes. We're going to use the word personne instead of gens because we use personne when we can count the number of people. And here we clearly can. Une vingtaine de personnes. Alors, Caroline fait toujours une liste de courses avant d'aller au supermarché. Caroline fait toujours une liste de courses avant d'aller au supermarché. So course, remember that course, when you're making a shopping list, this is for food, okay? The course, faire les courses is to go grocery shopping. So Caroline fait toujours une liste de courses, even though the course is plural. Avant d'aller, we've seen that, before going, avant de, see there's de again, this little word is super important, avant d'aller au supermarché, d'accord? Another reminder, the first 3 words of this sentence, Caroline fait toujours, I'm taking that short common adverb toujours, and I'm putting it after the first conjugated verb of the sentence, d'accord? Here we have an exception, and it's the same exception that we saw just a little while ago, all right? When you're indicating the quantity of a specific item, then you can use le, la, or les. So that means du, des, de la, de, L apostrophe, only when it's a specific item that you're indicating. For example, je vais te servir une tasse du café que j'ai préparé. Une tasse du café que j'ai préparé. You see, it's not just a cup of any old coffee, it's the coffee that I prepared. Est-ce que tu veux une part du gâteau que j'ai fait ce matin? Est-ce que tu veux une part du gâteau que j'ai fait ce matin? Do you want a piece of the cake that I made this morning? Not just any cake, but the one that I made. Very specific. Mon petit-fils a mangé les 2/3 des cerises que nous avons achetées au marché. See what 2/3 means. 2/3 de means 2/3 of. Mon petit-fils a mangé les 2/3 des cerises que nous avons achetées au marché. D'accord? So my grandson ate 2/3 of the cherries that we bought at the market. And something else just that I want to point out to you. You notice in French, it says, mon petit-fils a mangé les 2/3. So les means the, right? We don't say that in English. We don't say my grandson ate the 2/3 of the cherries that we bought at the market. But in French, you do, when you're indicating 2/3, for example, you put that definite article, les 2/3 des cerises. D'accord? All right, so now let's have a look at these common expressions of weight and volume. And you do have a study set on Quizlet that you can use to practice, so don't forget about that. Okay, so répétez après moi. Une abondance de. Une assiette de. Une barquette de. Une boîte de. Un bol de. Une bouchée de. Une boule de. Un bout de. Un bouquet de. Une bouteille de. Une canette de. Une carafe de. Un carton de. Une centaine de. Une cinquantaine de. We should have a de right here after une cinquantaine. Une cuillère de. Une cuillère à soupe de. Une cuillère à thé de. 2/3 de. Une dizaine de. Une douzaine de. Une énorme quantité de. Une gorgée de. Un gramme de. Une grappe de. Un kilo de. Une liste de. Un litre de. Une livre de. Une masse de. Un mètre de. Un millier de. La moitié de. Un morceau de. Un panier de. Un paquet de. Une part de. Une pincée de. Un plat de. Un plateau de. Une poignée de. Un pot de. Une quarantaine de. Un quart de. Une quinzaine de. Un sac de. Un seau de. Une soixantaine de. Une tablette de. Une tasse de. Un tiers de. Une tranche de. Une trentaine de. Un tube de. Un verre de. Une vingtaine de. D'accord? Okay, so voila, I'm sure that some of these are definitely new to you. So practice, practice, practice. And when you are ready, you can take your quiz D'accord? And then after that, we are going to talk about some verbs that are followed by de and then an infinitive. And then you will have a chance to start working on your practice cards. D'accord? Okay, merci et à bientôt.